So in this video, I'm going to walk through 5 deceptively simple ways to increase your capacity and energize leaders in your church by rethinking your staffing model. And you're going to want to stay to the end when I present some practical steps that you can take to get started. Let's get into it. So church staffing models typically involve a lot of paid staff doing most of the work and coordinating some well-meaning volunteers over time. And I've seen this in many of the churches I've been part of. I've seen it in other churches that I've observed when I've talked to pastors. This is fairly typical. And so what happens is you have these staff-heavy models that often can limit growth and can really exhaust leadership. And one of the things, as I've talked about in the book of Nehemiah, the pastors I worked with as we started to develop that model, were really feeling the weight of doing all the work of the church. And even looking back, they've said, it didn't seem like we were doing all the work or a majority of the work, but looking back, they really are, especially now when they're doing it a different way. So a lot of times churches get stuck in this cycle of over-dependence on paid leaders. And what it means is there comes this point where we say, we can't do that. We can't pursue that part of the ministry, or we feel God prompting us in this direction, but we just don't have the leadership capacity or just the people to be able to do it. So Nehemiah showed an example of how to integrate formal and volunteer leadership for greater impact. And so when we see Nehemiah show up in Jerusalem to do the wall building project, he spends 3 days. We're not sure what he was doing in those 3 days. Some say he was resting, but the reality is at the end of 3 days, he seemed to have everyone's attention and they seemed pretty interested and willing to get involved with what he was doing. So I think what that shows is that Nehemiah was not just talking to people, he was recruiting not just volunteers, but he was recruiting leaders. Those individuals who could be a champion of a part of the cause, that could get really energized behind it, and also could bring with them a lot of people that are used to working with them. A lot of times I call these serving circles, as I have somebody that they're already in a role where, maybe formal or maybe informal, where people are used to following them. And so you probably know who these people are in your church. These are the people that kind of lead the club or have a bunch of people over their house on a regular basis. Or when there's a project to be done, they show up and like half a dozen other people show up with them ready to work. And you didn't even ask them to come. And so these are the individuals who become those champions. And Nehemiah really gives us a blueprint for this. In fact, if you read Nehemiah 3, which can be a tough part of Nehemiah to read, it's actually a really good chapter to read to see almost like how Nehemiah structured the work of the initial project to build the wall, where you see 43 segments of the wall, and each one has a champion, has a person who kind of draws a group of people around them to do the work. And so they each have a section of the wall. It's near where they live. It's near where they work. They have people that are coming to help. And they really just get started. So the one thing I would just challenge you to think about in terms of your staffing model is, where can you augment your paid staff with unpaid volunteer leaders? I'm not just saying volunteers here, but volunteer leaders, those that have made a commitment to invest a certain amount of time, to take on a certain role, to go through some training to be prepared to be effective in that role, and to operate almost as if they were paid staff. They might not work 40 or 50 hours a week like a paid staff person might, but they are committing to more than just showing up occasionally to help out. They're going to say, I'm going to invest 5, 10, 15 hours a week doing this role and really working through this like I were part of the staff. Perhaps even become part of the org chart. I met with a pastor recently who talked about almost 2/3 of the staff on the org chart are volunteer leaders. And they've really built a program. They built a system that looks at volunteer leaders and paid staff leaders in much the same way. Even situations where paid staff were reporting to volunteer leaders they're really investing a lot of time in the ministry and were taking on a formal role in this way. So Nehemiah's leadership approach, we see that he's recruiting, empowering, and activating volunteer leaders from all walks of life. You see merchants, you see priests and Levites, you see government leaders, you see goldsmiths, you see people that are producing products and goods. So you have people from all different walks of life, but then he's mobilizing them together to be leaders in a formal structure. So you see things like, the nobles repaired the walls near their homes. So the ministry was localized. It was also shared. And so leaders were recruited that were already in a place where they could be a champion and really carry the load with others and really recruiting and bringing people into this process. This is one of the reasons that I do cohorts for pastors to help think through how can we take Nehemiah's blueprint for mobilizing volunteer leaders in the church and how can we apply this in our church setting. And I find one of the best ways to do this is for pastors to get together from different churches, but in a peer cohort for a limited period of time, really working through a model of, how can we develop a strategy? How can we identify and mobilize those that could be volunteer leaders in the church and really incorporate them into our org structure and activate them? And so what I've developed is a 6-week cohort, and it's based on the book, The Nehemiah Way. So if you've read that book, you already know what this is about. But what the book doesn't do is get into as much in terms of how you would really plan, prepare, and implement this structure on a large scale within your church. And this cohort is really designed to do that. So I have some content that you can go through on your own. There's some videos, there's worksheets, there's challenges each week, daily readings in the book of Nehemiah. And then we get together once a week as a group to talk through things that we're working on, things that, just challenges or ideas that, we're going to just need some input. And really draw on each other's experience, input, as well as, me providing some coaching and pointing to things that have worked out through the Nehemiah Way blueprint as well. So if you're interested in this, click in the link down below. You can get some information about the next cohort. You can also get a free download that is a resource kit to go along with the book, The Nehemiah Way. It's got a daily reading guide. It has a mobilization diagnostic, and it has a mobilization checklist to help you start to plan this. And the cohort can really enforce this work. So I hope you'll sign up and check it out. So now I'm going to walk through 5 principles that you can draw from Nehemiah's blueprint and how you could rethink your staffing model. So let's start with principle number 1 is expand beyond paid staff. And really that's the whole point of this video, is to start to think about going beyond just those that you're paying to work full-time in the ministry, and think about how you can draw those that are members of the organization in to use their time, their talent, their treasure to really fuel the ministry forward. Every church has these high capacity volunteers with untapped leadership potential. You sometimes, if you've heard one of my talks or you've seen some of the videos, we jokingly call them pew potatoes. They're really good people and they're very competent people. They're very experienced people. They bring a lot to the table, but for the most part, they're just showing up Sunday morning for the service. They're not really contributing a lot. And most of my experience has been that it's not that they don't want to. It's that no one's asked them to, or they haven't really seen, is there a need that I could fill? How do I get involved? So in this way, the formal staff can act as force multipliers, not just doers, but they can really equip and prepare leaders, or really facilitate those volunteer leaders as they're getting mobilized and as they're mobilizing others. So Nehemiah had these section leaders who mobilized others. So it's like the mobilizers that are mobilizing others to mobilize volunteers. So it's kind of a multi-step process in that way. And so these section leaders, these champions, can be those that sign up to be a leader in a particular area, and they are, have a particular set of responsibilities that they've been given that they're going to carry out as if they're part of the staff. And the staff is really giving them what they need to be able to focus on that work, recruiting the right people, setting the stage, preparing, praying with them, planning, really getting things set up so that they can execute, a formal program in a really excellent way, even though they're not using paid resources. Principle number 2 in the Nehemiah blueprint is mobilize natural champions. Some people just naturally gather others around them. So if you can put them in the right spots, they can do so much. And these are the kind of people, like when you call them, it's the only call you have to make. And so particularly if you can place these individuals in a formal role where they even have some ownership over the planning and the strategy of the particular ministry, they're really the ones that are diving in, prayerfully considering what God's calling to happen, and then recruiting others to get involved, even in helping them plan, helping them execute. So looking for those natural champions or those individuals that really draw serving circles around them can be really key. And these champions can become magnets for ministry involvement. So if they really start to build a culture and a team of people that like really get to know each other and work well together and find purpose and fulfillment together and spiritual enrichment and discipleship, people are going to get involved there like they would a community group. And this can be, this power of community can be a way to really draw people in and get them engaged. And Nehemiah particularly not only identified these champions, but they gave them very specific responsibilities and visibility and an accountability. So each person, each group that's identified in Nehemiah 3 had a section of the wall. It's like start here and go to here. And there were specs about how the wall was going to be built. It's going to be so thick. It's going to be thick enough we can walk on top of the wall when we celebrate. And then it's going to be at least, the foundation needs to be built or repaired. And then we need to build it up to 4 feet tall. And then later we're going to build it from 4 to 8 feet tall. And so there's even that phase thing that's happening there. But ultimately it's starting with Nehemiah is identifying a champion. He's providing a clear set of a role and responsibilities and really clarifying like, here's what needs to happen. Here's how it needs to happen. And then turning that person loose, turning that group loose to get the job done. Principle number 3 in the Nehemiah blueprint is segment the work strategically. Not every job is the same and not every team needs to have the same skills. When Nehemiah was building the wall, everyone was, in a sense, doing the same thing, laying brick and those kinds of things. But later, it was like there were those that needed to provide defense. There were probably those that needed to run supplies and make sure that the right supplies were in the right place. Communication needed to happen between and among the groups. And of course, the leader of each area had to know like what their responsibility was. Just making sure they're on schedule. They had the supplies they needed. They were prepared. The right people were doing the right things. They had the skills they needed. So this is where, the part of the effort is just defining segments. So within the church, you have things like discipleship, outreach, facilities, digital care, digital activities, sermon prep, worship, Sunday services. So these are all different things that need to have champions and a team, and finding those individuals that are both skilled in the right way to be able to lean in on those areas and also have the interest and the enthusiasm and the inspiration for those things is really going to do a lot to make sure these teams are energized, engaged, and moving things forward. Also, dividing up labor the way Nehemiah did. Each family or each group had a focused portion of the work to do. And he made sure that they understood the mission, the purpose, understood the standards that everyone was going to follow, and understood how this was going to fit into the big picture. So dividing that labor into manageable chunks was one of the ways he was really able to multiply the amount of work that could be done, because every group knew what they were doing, what their work was, and they were getting it done. And that was all happening at the same time. So there was this coordination that was happening, but also simultaneously work happening all at once. Principle number 4 of the Nehemiah blueprint is aligning the work with proximity and passion. People worked opposite their house in a lot of cases. They operated in an area where it was close to them. When it came time to defend themselves, they were defending not only themselves, but their family that was right behind them and their homes that was right behind them. So it was really placing people where they had the most proximity. They were already in those spaces, but also they had the greatest interest. They were working on a part of the wall that was going to be part of their lived experience going forward. It was something they had a vested interest in. So in today's terms, that means assigning work near someone's gifting, their passion, their geography, their relationships. Really being intentional about that gives you the opportunity to have individuals that are engaged and really connected to the work that they're doing. Principle number 5 of the Nehemiah blueprint is to equip people with prayer, planning, and preparation. And these are the first 3 key things that are highlighted in the book, The Nehemiah Way, because this is what Nehemiah's playbook was always. He first would pray, then he would plan, then he would prepare. And that all happened before any work got started. Nehemiah didn't just hand out jobs. He prayed continuously. He looked for God's input and he looked for God's direction in all the things that he was doing. Then he was diligent in the planning process, thinking through all of the details so that when he did start to prepare, he knew everything that he needed to account for in that preparation. And that all happened before work commenced, because that way everyone started with the end in mind and everyone started prepared to do what they needed to achieve their outcomes. So this is where Nehemiah used prayerful planning. And he was, meeting with people. He was intentionally onboarding and showing exactly what needed to happen and how it needed to happen. So this is where leaders need tools, not just titles. Titles can be helpful though, because they provide clarity of role, and they also can establish that this person is on point for this part of the work. So those that are following them know this is who is really going to be providing the direction here. And I'm, going to get involved and really support what they're doing. So those are the 5 principles of the Nehemiah blueprint. And now I want to just talk briefly about how you can start rethinking your staffing model. So number 1, start with a map. What are your current ministry areas? And map those out and identify what they are. But don't stop there. In fact, this is a good time to really think about what God has called you to do as a ministry that you've just put on hold because you don't feel like you have the resources. I talked with someone recently who said they took several of these areas and presented them to a group of people in the church and just said, we feel like God's calling us to do these, but we just don't have the people and resources to do it. And what they found was they didn't even finish that meeting before a number of people had volunteered to champion those ministries and to really take ownership of them and drive them forward. And so this can be really a great opportunity to map out not just your current ministry areas, but also those that you feel God's calling you to, but you're just not sure yet how you would approach them. And this is a great opportunity to have faith that God is going to provide that right from your own congregation. Number 2, identify key champions. Who do people already follow? Who are the people that already naturally seem to have people around them on a regular basis that aren't really serving in a leadership role? Identifying these individuals and starting to engage with them and alerting them to things that you're feeling called to do or needs in the church that they might take an interest in and be willing to step in and take on some formal leadership capacity. And they might be willing to step in and take on a formal leadership role in carrying these forward. And then third, begin segmenting and assigning leadership, both formally and informally. This can be something where you can test out ideas that you have in small ways and asking someone to do something small in an area just to test out to see, is this something that would be beneficial to our community or beneficial to the congregation or would really serve or promote or advance part of the ministry in ways that we haven't been able to before. And then if it does seem to start to have an effect, to build on that and ask them to really expand what they're doing in ways that could have a much greater impact over time. If you're tired and you feel like you're carrying it all, it may be time to rethink your staffing model. And in this video, we covered the 5 principles that you can see in Nehemiah's blueprint for recruiting, equipping, and activating volunteer leaders in your church and incorporating them into your staff as if they were paid staff. And these ways, getting them energized and really looking for ways to draw more people in that are excited about contributing to the mission and the ministry of your church. And in a lot of ways, it's creating discipleship opportunities for them as well as opportunities for them to serve. If you've read the book, The Nehemiah Way, or you're interested in mobilizing a church full of leaders, I'd encourage you to download the free resource kit that's available in the description below. In this, you'll find a diagnostic you can use for mobilization at your church, a checklist to get started, and also a daily reading plan for the book of Nehemiah. If you'd like more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. And if this video was helpful, please like it and also make comments or post questions. I'll be happy to respond. This helps me to know what kinds of videos I can produce that would be helpful to you in the future as you seek to mobilize a church full of leaders. Keep going.